Welcome to Ace of Pentacles, your career strategy and workplace wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sara, and I'm so happy you're here. Join me every week as we investigate how people design and discover their way through their careers. Together, we'll explore the science of well-being at work and discover tools and strategies to help us do well and be well.
Okay.
All right. Hi, Bill Burnett. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Bill, you are the executive director, co-founder and executive director of the Life Design Lab at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
I am a Designing Your Life certified coach. I went through Designing Your Life coach training.
Yeah.
And I have this podcast where I'm hoping to share information with people who are looking for ways to design and discover their way through life, especially with regards to their career.
Right.
And so I'm so happy to be talking to you today because hearing your stories and using the tools that you've created has really helped me shape a lot of my life, especially over the past just 3 or 4 years. Designing Your Life tools and the framework, the philosophy is something I really promote. I promote the books to my clients, and I think it's some of the best tools that you can get to figure it out.
Well, thank you. We worked hard on them, so I'm glad that you find them useful.
Yeah. Bill, let's start with telling our audience who is Bill Burnett. Who are you? Tell us about your career journey and your story.
Well, I often with the students, of course, we're always trying to dispel what psychologists call dysfunctional beliefs. And one of the dysfunctional beliefs is whatever you pick, in college, you're going to do for the rest of your life. And it's going to be a completely linear journey. And you're going to start here and end there. And I don't know, mine's almost anything but that. I grew up back east. I grew up in Boston, in the Boston area. And when the time came to go to college, I didn't really think that much about it. I applied to a couple places. I was probably going to go to some East Coast school. And then at the last minute, I hand wrote a really bad application to this school called Stanford, and somehow or other got in. And my algorithm, my choosing algorithm was get as far away from my parents as possible. I just wanted to go far away from my parents. My sister went to school in Boston. She went to Simmons, which is a wonderful women's college. And she said, get out of town because you don't want mom and dad visiting you all the time. So I just went. I just got on a plane and flew to Stanford. And this was before that was a big deal. Like my parents put me on an airplane and said, have a nice college. Nowadays, there's all this stuff about going to college and parents show up and everything. Anyway, I went and it turned out to be great because it was the only school on the planet at the time that had a program in human-centered design, which, I was sort of an artist. I still am an artist. I'm a painter, but I also liked engineering and sort of science and physics and things. And so this combination of science and psychology and ethnography and everything just seemed like a really good thing. But I ended up wandering around. I did a couple of jobs in the toy industry, came back to the Bay Area, got my master's, started doing stuff in tech, then did some more toys, and then went back to tech and went to Apple. I did a couple startups. But it's kind of just been, I found stuff that was interesting. I didn't have a plan, and it was sort of wandering around. Later, when Dave and I got together and started putting all this stuff together in a framework, the Designing Life framework, using, design thinking to, empathy, define, express, ideate, prototype, test process, I realized, I know what I was doing. I was just prototyping my way forward. I was finding things I didn't like, and then finding things I liked just by trying stuff. And then talking to people. And I'm kind of an introvert, so it wasn't like I'm a natural networker or anything like that. I was just intuitively figuring out that if I was going to be happy, the jobs had to have something to do with, what I liked in my life. And so one of the big reframes we talk about in the class is because a lot of people, like you said in your introduction, they're looking for advice on jobs. And we have lots of advice on jobs. We wrote a whole book called Designing Your Work Life. In fact, we wrote it twice, once before COVID, once after COVID. But the theme of that book and of all the books are, you can't design a job and be happy. You have to design your life with a good job in it. And what most companies get wrong in their, personal development programs or their programs for employees is they give them lots of tools to optimize themselves on the job, but they don't talk about how the job and life fit together. And when COVID hit, one of the positives was people started to realize, because they're working from home, they could manage, their lives and their jobs a really different way. People realized, wait a minute, like 44 million people quit between 2022 and 2024. They just quit their jobs because they realized, hey, these jobs are inhuman. And all these programs you have for optimizing my performance for your job are not about me, they're about you. So I quit. So it's like, look, if you want to have healthy jobs, you got to have healthy lives first. And so you have to think about, well, what am I looking for? Where's the job fit in? And, it's fine if the job's just for money. It's okay. It doesn't have to be for everything. So I think for me, I've never worked for money. I've always found things that were interesting. And the proof of that is, before I had been teaching part-time at Stanford for a long time, but in 2006, David Kelley started the D School, our big institute, and kind of made design thinking an international thing. And David's amazing. But I've been doing part-time teaching here, and David called me up and said, hey, listen, I'm doing this D School thing. I need help running the undergraduate and the graduate program in design, the programs I graduated from. He said, have you ever thought about being a full-time academic? I was like, well, I haven't really thought about it, but that's kind of interesting. How much does it pay? And it paid 40% of what I was making. I had my own consulting firm. I was making pretty good money. And I'm like, okay, the 60% pay cut, that's interesting. And I took it, and I've never been happier. I've never made less money in any job I've ever had, and I've never been happier. So I'm not saying, and I don't have a lot of money. It's not like I've got a lot of money I can just sit on it. It's just that money's a way of measuring, your value in the world, and it's important, but it's just in a balance of other things. And for me, the ability to teach young students how to design stuff, and now the designing your life stuff, and I see the impact it has on people. It's like I do it for free. If I could, I do need money. I have to pay my mortgage and stuff. So I guess the net of my journey is, one, I've always kind of had a compass that was sort of based around value and impact and having fun. And I found my way to things that would allow me to do that and really express my interests. And it wasn't a straight line by any means. I never expected to be a full-time academic. I never expected, in my whole life, I never thought of writing a book ever. Yeah. Until like 2014, when I finally convinced Dave we should write a book, because I wanted to get the stuff off campus. Again, it's just about impact. We didn't know if anybody would buy the book, and how to take we had been teaching the class for about 8 years, but the class is a dynamic kind of, rolling thing. We're having experiences, and we're seeing how the students are reacting. A book is a very static, one-way conversation. I'm talking to you about things, and I'm trying to make it easy for you to follow, but I'm not there in the room when you're reading. So we didn't know if we could do it. We never written anything before. And that's why when people say, oh, I like the book, I always ask them, well, what was useful? Like, what worked? Yeah. Because, I'm not in their room when they're reading. I really want to know. So none of these things were planned. All of these things turn out to be pretty cool. And, I'm just lucky, I guess, in a way that before we worked it out and said, oh, well, this is about prototyping experiences. Oh, this is about making sure you generate lots of ideas before you pick a path. This is about empathy for yourself. What do you need? And then empathy for the world. What does the world need done? Just because you want to be a poet doesn't mean anybody's going to pay you $100,000 a year to be a poet, right? So you got to match stuff. And I was doing that intuitively, and then we finally figured out how to make it more of a framework or a system. And so the book just is my life experience written out so that somebody else could make some sense of it. Yeah. I'm grabbing the book that I have right here. The Designing Your Life. One of my favorite books on my bookshelf that I always refer to. Bill, that was such a good story. Thank you so much for sharing that about your journey. And
I love how you talk about all of it, but I think the money conversation is so interesting, right?
Yeah.
So many people, especially here living in the Bay Area, they're like, well, the number one thing is to make money. And then you work backwards from there. And I'm always really curious about how do we flip that conversation, because last year I left my job as head of HR for a firm and I was making really good money.
Yeah.
My happiness was like, not that great. The money was great, And then I always tell people, I'm like, when I left, I teach psychology at Laney College, and I've been doing that for several years. And that was always a part-time thing. It's still a part-time thing. I'm doing this podcast now. I'm coaching. I don't know how many clients I'm going to get. It always just works out. I feel like it always works out. Yeah. And I don't know how to explain that other than it just works out when you're doing things you enjoy doing.
Well, there's a lot of research, about, product. Oh, look, the recent Gallup poll is even worse in terms of employee engagement.
Yeah.
Less than 30%, less than, I think, 28% of U.S. workers are engaged at work. I mean, we got a factory that's producing 82% unhappy people. And, you can't even, I'm an old manufacturing guy. You can't even fix that. You should just shut the company down and start over. So people aren't happy at work for a bunch of different reasons. And look, again, people need money. You need money to survive. And if you can get enough, and you can frame working for money, that's fine. It's a pretty modern idea that you're going to get your happiness, your purpose, your meaning, and your money from some corporation that's got jobs set up, and you're in HR. The jobs are set up to get transactions and tasks done. Yeah. The CEO isn't sitting there thinking, how can we have more meaning in the company? Oh, we'll make some money selling some stuff too. We're selling stuff. That's what we're doing, and that's what's important. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the system. But if you go into it, particularly the younger generations, Gen Zs really want meaning and purpose in their jobs, and they're really struggling to find it because it's just not the way jobs are configured. Now, you can create your own meaning and purpose in a job. You can decide that I'm working for I'm working for learning. I'm working for, we have the Good Work Journal where we talk about the three intrinsic motivations: autonomy, relatedness, working with people, and competence and mastery, getting better at stuff. So you can just decide, I'm here for autonomy, relatedness, and competence. I'm learning something. I'm getting better at something, and I'm helping something. So that's that model, and you just do a little checklist, and you can be perfectly happy. And, just to frame it, my grandparents were immigrants. On my mom's side, they came from Germany, classic American. 2 generations ago, they lived in Germany. My grandfather was not an educated guy, but he didn't like. So in 1933, he managed to get the family out of Germany. 1933 was when Hitler was elected chancellor, and he saw that and he said, "This isn't gonna go well." It's kind of his Trump moment, and he left. I don't know how he did it. Got on a steamship. He got passage by shoveling coal into the boilers, and got the family to California of all places. And his thing was like, make enough money to put a roof over our head, get the kids to school, get them a better life than we had. My grandmother spoke no English when she landed in America. She took in laundry from the rich people in Palo Alto, rich ladies in Palo Alto. And he worked at the sewage factory, literally shoveling shit from one tank to another for 50 cents a day. Yeah. He wasn't going to work for purpose. His purpose came from his community, from his church, from his goal to, give his kids something better. But he didn't go to work saying, boss, this shoveling shit thing, it just doesn't work for me. You got a different job? He took any job. And at night he was a bartender and whatever he could do. And that's the immigrant story from lots of families, only 2 or 3 generations. His kids went to San Jose State. My parents got the chance to send me to Stanford. My daughter just finished a PhD in cancer immunology at UCSF and is in a new startup trying to cure cancer. So, 3-4 generations, the American story, the American dream, whatever. But in all of those things, my dad didn't. My dad had a meaningful job, but he worked his ass off to make sure that we had something more than he had. And that's a pretty noble purpose. So, quit complaining that your boss doesn't understand you and get to work.
Yeah. Bill, I think that's such a cool story. As we were speaking, I was reminded of a family friend of ours. Many years ago, so I'm an immigrant. My mom moved us here when I was like 2 from Pakistan. And, I was super lucky. Like, I'm so glad that we got to have the life that we got to have living in California. My mom struggled, she was a professor of economics back in Peshawar in Pakistan. And she came here and she worked at like Walgreens and Popeyes and like gave us the life that we have now. And I feel so privileged sometimes to have this life. But at one point in my life, I was like, oh, I really want to do like employee engagement. That's what I want to do. I love the idea of like, how are people motivated? That's how I kind of got my start in HR. And a family friend of ours was like, so what do you do for work? And I was like, employee engagement programs. And he's from Pakistan. And he's like, what is that? And I was like, well, it's about how people feel like valued and happy at work and recognized. And he goes, does your company not pay people? I was like, no, they get a paycheck. They get a great paycheck. But then, we want them to feel good. And he's like, do they not have other things that can help them feel good?
Yeah, exactly.
Are they lonely?
It is somewhat of a generational thing. By the way, I was just in Karachi. I did.
In Karachi?
Well, there's a school over there, IBA, which is the oldest business school, they say, in the Middle East. That was started by Wharton back in the 50s. And they're part of our learning community. And I went over to help them get started teaching Designing Your Life. So we're not teaching Designing Your Life in Karachi.
In Pakistan? This is the most exciting news I've heard all week, Bill. This is great. I love this.
But what your friend, your older friend is saying is like, I don't even understand the value system. Like, these people are getting paid, they're getting paid well. Yeah. What else do they expect? And I'm not saying that companies do need to respond to the fact that their employees are disengaged. Mm-hmm. And it's not that hard, actually, if you have, for me, it's because I did a talk for, there was a convention of, chief learning officers, chief HR officers. And I went to this thing and I did a talk. I said, look, we know how to do this. We know how to make companies where people feel valued and people feel like the mission of the company is their mission. And I gave the example. So when my dad got out of San Jose State, on the GI Bill, he had a summer job at a little startup up on Page Mill Road. The little startup turned out to be Hewlett Packard. He knew Dave and Bill, and he was there for 44 years and then retired. And when that company started, when those two founders started, they had this thing called the HP Way, and it was sort of five values of the company, and they were the embodiment of those values. And one of the things that and they had never in the period of the 35 or 40, 37 years they ran the company, they never had a layoff. They never had a reduction in force. They never had any of that baloney. We're all a team. Oh, but we had a bad quarter, so we're laying you off. And in fact, at one time when the economy was really bad and the industry and tech industry was crashing and everybody's laying people off in the 70s, Bill and Dave issued a letter to the employees saying, look, we're in a big financial crisis. It's our fault. We're the management. We take full responsibility for it. But we're going to have to we're going to furlough everybody 2 Fridays a month. And we think if we do that, we can handle it. But also, because we're telling you can't come in on 2 Fridays a month, since we're not going to pay you for 2 Fridays a month, you don't have to come in, and we'll work it out. And once we get through this, because it's our responsibility, we made bad choices. So, and we're going to take a salary of 0. And you know what happened? The employees were like, we get it. We're all in this together. They all came in on the Fridays. They all worked harder. They pulled the company, back into the black faster than any other company in the Valley. Nobody quit because the founders took. It's like Zuckerberg goes, "Oh, I'm going to lay off 10% of the people because we overhired during COVID. That was your choice. That was your mistake. Why do I have to pay for a management's mistake?" because Bill and Dave had integrity. They said, we're in charge. It's our responsibility. We screwed up. We will take zero salaries. We're sorry we have to give everybody, whatever, 2 out of 28 days less salary, but you don't have to come to work. Have an extra couple of Fridays. And because they took responsibility for their bad choices, their employee loyalty, their employee engagement was off the charts for 37 years. Then when they left and they brought in other management, and then Carly Fiorina came in and split the company up, the company no longer has those values because it's got rent-a-cop, CEOs who don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And they're just managing it for Wall Street. So we know how to do it. It starts with integrity. It starts with the people making the decisions, taking responsibility for their decisions. Oh, and by the way, as of course, Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett, Dave Packard ended up billionaires because of their stock ownership and stuff. But their salaries weren't 300 times, the lowest salary. They didn't exploit their position of power to give themselves more salaries. And I think it's fair if you own equity in the company, you're risking your own money for the equity. If you're successful, of course you should win. But thousands of HP employees, by the way, they were the first company in Silicon Valley to give stock options. I was able to go to Stanford because my dad had HP stock options that he could sell and finance my education. They were the first company to do that. They were the first company to give employees free vacations. They owned big basin in the Redwoods, in the Redwoods in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
They owned Little Basin, and you could go there for free. And they set up camps and stuff. I grew up back east because they had transferred my dad back there. They owned a lake on Cape Cod, and they built cabins all around it. And you could go to Cape Cod for free, which is the dream vacation for all New Englanders. They did all sorts of things to show the employees that they were important. And so we know how to do this. Just get better CEOs. Starts there. Yeah. CEOs that aren't just in it for a quick hit or in it for, something. Like, get good CEOs who care, and then walk the walk. And when you make a bad decision, take responsibility for it. That will get you. I mean, it's not hard. This isn't hard. But when I talk to the chief learning officers and the HR folks, the C-level folks, at dinner the night before, they said, yeah, but we don't have that situation. Our CEO was brought in by this private equity firm, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. They're asking us to do these employment development programs, but every time they have a bad quarter, they cut our budget. I mean, you know how it goes. So we can make work better. Just,
It requires integrity and kindness, which aren't easy things to find in people these days, I find. It sounds like it should be so simple, right? I agree with you. I think it's not hard, but it requires integrity and honesty and transparency and kindness and these values that I think we have started to separate ourselves from a little bit.
Well, maybe we aren't teaching those values in business school, or maybe people, take examples of, Elon Musk might be the most egregious example of, like, folks who create. I mean, I know from folks at Tesla. I don't know anybody at SpaceX, but I know a bunch of my engineers from Apple went to Tesla, and it's a half and half. It's sort of like great work, creative stuff, always pushing the edge, and an absolutely abysmal management and sort of management process. I don't know. What's, a lot of the people I know who are in senior positions who kind of manage the way they think they're supposed to manage, that I know personally, they're very nice people. Mm-hmm. Good to their children. They have integrity. Maybe they have a church or spiritual community they go to. They're nice people, but they don't hold themselves accountable at work for some reason, because work's different. Everybody, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and it's just about making money and da-da-da-da-da. Several of my students have started amazing companies and are worth billions of dollars. And I'm not going to talk about individuals, but The ones who were really, good people at school are still good people, and they had a couple $1 billion. And in very few cases, the people who maybe weren't that same person. I think what happens is when you get a lot of money, you just become more like yourself, right? If you're a good person,
Yeah.
you're still a good person. You just have lots of money. If you're kind
I
of a,
like,
if you're
I
kind
like
of a
that
jerk,
reframe.
you're kind of a jerk. You got a lot of money, well, you're kind of a bigger jerk.
Bill, I love that reframe. I work a lot through the dual enrollment program and I go teach at high schools around Oakland.
Oh, cool.
And I love doing that work. And a lot of the times my students are just like, well, money, they have this idea of like money makes you evil. Money makes you a bad person because they see people who have money and they're like, well, look at what, like Zuckerberg's doing and Elon Musk is doing and all these. And so they're like, well, they have this idea. And I really like that reframe. Money just makes you more of who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give a shout out to women here. It's like, I don't think Bill Gates is necessarily a nice person, but if it hadn't been for Melinda, there wouldn't be a Bill and Melinda Foundation, and there wouldn't be his philanthropy. I don't think that Zuckerberg's going to be a bad person, but it's absolutely Priscilla who's driving the philanthropy side of that relationship. And Bezos and his wife. I mean, Mackenzie Bezos has left that relationship with $50 billion, has given away $10 or $15 billion, and now has 60 because it grows too fast. And her philanthropy is amazing. She's not giving $10 million to Stanford to build a new building. Stanford doesn't need another $10 million, even $1 billion. Stanford has a $38 billion endowment. It's ridiculous. She's giving money to small schools in the South, to women's colleges, and her $1 million or $2 million is the most money they've ever gotten in their lives, and she's actually moving the needle. And her philanthropy is amazing. So is Lorraine Jobs. Her philanthropy is amazing. So I'm going to argue that the tech bros, they probably would have just bought more Teslas or Ferraris. It's their wife that actually makes the difference.
Yeah.
I
agree with you.
It's a very small sample, but think about it. Lorraine Jobs, Mackenzie Bezos,
it's a good sample. It's a good sample.
It's a pretty consistent sample.
Yeah.
And that kind of philanthropy really does move the needle. I mean, the Gates Foundation trying to end malaria, and they could do it. They could do it in the next 10 years.
Yeah. Bill, you spoke really, really well to like the problem of employee engagement in companies, and does the Life Design Lab currently or have plans to consult, or do you consult with companies and organizations that need that kind of a lens on this problem?
Yeah, we do. So one of my students came in my office about 2015. I think he says like, "Hey, Bill," because they don't call me professor, they call me. They said like, "Everybody, if this is right when Instagram was sold to Facebook for $1 billion. Everybody's trying to make pictures on the internet permanent. What if we made them disappear?" And I said, "Evan, that's a dumb idea. Why would people want their pictures to disappear?" And that's Evan Spiegel, and that's Snapchat.
Yeah.
And he's been very successful, and he's wonderful. He's a wonderful guy, and he's still a wonderful guy. He's very driven, but he's a good soul. And we have an affiliate program, and we've worked with them for a couple of 3 years now on their employee engagement stuff, and and they had to have some layoffs, and so how do you reengage? How do you reframe and reengage after the culture's been disrupted? So we've done it there. And then we have an institute in Singapore, the Design Life Institute in Singapore, and there we're working with 3 or 4 of the big government. Singapore is very government run. Yeah. So we're working with one of the government organizations that helps promote small and medium businesses. But what they want is more, government employees, more engagement. And in the government system there, you're kind of into the government as a civil servant, and then you have to rotate out at a certain point. So DYL is a great sort of, all right, what's my next plan? Because I know I'm going to rotate out of the government. Now you could go to another government agency, or you could go to the private sector, whatever. So we're working with 2 different big government agencies there. And the coolest thing, so in Singapore, every male has to do national service. They got to go in the military. So you have to do 2 years of service. You typically do it right after either your junior college or your college experience. And you're either in the Army, Navy, Air Force, the police, or the what we would call National Guard. They have a sort of a public service. And we have a program for all the NS men who are coming out of the Navy. Now take designing your life as a way of thinking about, all right, I'm done with my national service. Now I'm going to launch my career. But I don't have any strategy. What do I do? And the pilot with the Navy's gone so well that the Army wants to do it. And then if we get the Army, we'll get the whole thing. And that means by year 3 or 4, I will have trained half of the islands of Singapore on designing your life.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That is so amazing. Bill, when you started doing this work, when you were making the decision to come to Stanford, could you have even imagined where you'd be
when
here?
Dave and I first got together, because he was doing a class over in Berkeley on careers, he and I have known each other for a while. He got together. He said, "Hey, I'm doing this class at Berkeley, but it's a long commute from Santa Cruz. Have you thought about doing anything like this at Stanford?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but if we do it, it's got to be a design thing." So we prototyped something that summer, and then we rolled it out just for and I thought this is just going to be for my design students to help them launch, because design's a kind of a funny profession. And in 2007, it wasn't that popular. And anyway, I was just trying to help students. And then we had a speaker in from the Career Center, just talking about the Career Center resources. And he was like, "I love this class. Could you teach this for all the seniors?" And I was like, no, that won't work, because I only know design. I don't know how to teach people who want to be I don't know, an astronaut or a writer. And he said, "I think it'll work." And Dave and I did a pilot, and it worked really well. And then it became very popular. And then the vice provost for undergraduate education at the time, a guy named Harry Elam, who's now the president down at the Occidental colleges. But when he was here, he said, "Can you do a class for all the freshmen? Because I want the freshmen to have this experience." And so every time I was like, "No, I don't think it'll work." And then to get people to leave me alone, I was like, "Oh, but it costs a lot of money. I'd need a bunch of money. I'd have to hire new instructors." And they kept saying yes, which was a real pain. So I
love that.
Very reluctantly scaled this. And then I had a moment. During COVID, I did a lot of walking in my neighborhood because everybody was walking and was getting healthy. And I did a lot of meetings on while I was walking on my headphones and stuff. And I was talking to the person who does our websites and social media stuff. And she said, "Hey, did you know that your TED Talk is over 8 million views?" I said, "No, that's ridiculous. No, why would it be 8? Like last I looked at it, it was 100,000. No, it's about 8 million and it's trending really fast." And I looked and I thought, oh, wait a minute. I have been behind. I've been under investing in this for a long time. I kept thinking it was this little tiny thing. And we got the book done, and the book blew up. It was just super exciting. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. If I'm going to serve this well, we need to up our game. The lab needs to be. So we started teaching studios. We now have over 500 universities around the world teaching this class. Far more students learn the DOL stuff off campus than on campus, right? I mean, if it's just 500 universities times 100, right? There's 50,000 students a year in classes. We have very popular classes, but I don't have 50,000. There's not even 50,000 students at Stanford. So I had no idea. And it's a complete, David Kelly, who's my boss here, who hired me, he calls it the success disaster. It's like, it's now become my full-time job. And I gave up the whole, I was running the undergrad and graduate program. I've given that off to the folks at the D school now, and I do this pretty much full-time. But no, we had no idea. I think because it's more fun. I mean, so the go-to book in this space for about 30 years was a book called "What Color Is Your Parachute?" I'm sure you know that book, right? Richard Bolt.
Yep.
And every year he did "What Color Is Your Parachute?" 2010, "What Color Is Your Parachute?" 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83. He's passed away, but his son is still doing the book. And it was a good book. And my goal was like, I want to be bigger than Parachute. And we're now like #1 on Amazon and in self-help and or career guidance. Yeah. And Parachute's #3 or something. So
yeah.
But no, it was a prototype.
Yeah.
Hey, let's try it. In fact, we wrote the book. Dave and I wrote a book, sort of. And Dave likes to, do the business thing. I said, go find us an agent. And he found us this great agent. And he said, what do you got? And I showed him like the first 9 chapters of a 10-chapter book. I said, I don't think it's very good. And he said, yeah, this is unpublishable. What'd you do? I just wrote up our lectures. I said, yeah. So we threw all that out, started over. And the second and third and fourth iterations of it turned out to be better.
Yeah.
So we use our own, I mean, we use design to design. We prototype everything. We prototype everything in class. We're doing pop-ups this quarter with AI and DYL to see what's going to work. And then we'll roll that into stuff next quarter. So we're constantly evolving the class. I mean, I looked at slides Dave and I used in 2008, 2009. We don't use any of that stuff anymore. It's all new because the students are different too.
Yeah. I think that's part of the problem with a lot of the frameworks and philosophies that are out there. They're just redoing the same thing over and over again. And with you and your work and what I've noticed with Design Your Life as part of the community, we get, emails, the coach community about, ways to incorporate Design Your Life. And there's like lunch or learning sessions for us. And that's one of the things I really, really like about the community and about the framework is that it's evolving as people evolve. We're changing so quickly as human beings. It's just the way that we look at the world, the way that we look at our lives. And this framework is evolving with us in all these different ways.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the second book, Design Your Work Life, came out. It came out in February 27th, 2020.
Yeah,
we're in New York at a book launch. We were in the Empire State Building. We were on CBS News. It was really exciting. On the flight home, I started hearing about this COVID thing in Scarsdale, and maybe they were going to shut down the city. And by March, the world had fallen apart.
Yeah.
So our wonderful editor at Knopf, Vicki Wilson, is now retired, but she was amazing. She called us up in 21 and said, "All right, the world of work has changed. Your book really didn't get a fair shot because it launched into the middle of a shutdown. Let's redo it, but give me some chapters on this COVID thing." And we stepped back and we said, "Well, it's not just COVID; it's just disruptions. And there's climate disruptions, there's economic disruptions. Now there's social disruptions in America. Right, we're divided, and then COVID, of course. And so we wrote the 3 new chapters in the Designing Your New Work Life on what we call disruption design, and how do you move from the old world to the new world, and what's the model? And we thought we had that covered, and then along comes AI. It's like, all right, everybody step back, take a deep breath, because things are going to change.
Yeah.
And even more so because, the COVID stuff came and went, and it did change the way we work, or at least change what people want in work.
Yeah.
But, and I think that some of that has been substantial, and some of that will remain forever.
Yeah.
But now we're facing the possibility that whole career paths or whole sets of jobs disappear. If you're in what I call the transactional economy, you're an investment banker, you move money from this thing to that, this investment to that investment, you take a little piece, you're dead because my AI can do it faster and better. If you just do wills and mortgages, my AI does it faster and better. So a lot of people who can make a lot of money doing these transactions and managing them expertly, will need far fewer of them. And I've been telling my students for a long time at Stanford, don't major in computer science because the easiest thing to automate code is code, like write code to write code.
Yeah.
And so I think the next 10 years, and I don't know how it's going to shake out. I do know that you want a resilient strategy for the future, you better be designing it. Because if you think you're going to plan it, good luck. I don't know how to plan anything in the face of this kind of disruption. But I'm excited about AI. Don't get me wrong. I think it's going to be cool. Yeah. I'm old. I remember the first spreadsheet. It was called VisiCalc. It only ran on the Apple II. If they hadn't made it, Apple wouldn't exist. Then came Lotus 1, 2, 3, and then came Excel. I remember, when I graduated as a young design engineer, you had to learn drafting. Yeah. I was drafting in 40 years. So I've seen all these changes, and whoever was a draftsman now is running CAD workstations, or whoever was the model maker is now 3D printing. So we adapt, but there'll be dislocations because this one will come quickly. What I couldn't predict is that 10 years from now the mix of careers will be quite different, and the things that generate lots of wealth and things will change. And everybody, the World Economic Forum, McKinsey's report on this stuff. If you look at all the kind of quote, and if you amalgamate the the expert opinion on this stuff, and they're not very good at forecasting. But if you just put it all together, the social emotional stuff, the caregiving stuff, the healthcare stuff that involves human to human.
Yeah.
And actually, I think creativity, the ability to synthesize information and come up with new ideas, assisted by AI and other things, will still be even more highly valuable. And I think maybe there's going to be a renaissance in the arts and music and poetry and things where people want the human thing. They pay more for the human thing.
Yeah.
Maybe, hopefully. And then other things will just be displaced, and we'll have to figure out how to make sure everybody has a way to make a living. We're not very good at this technology transition stuff, but and the notion of all this debate about, well, we're going to put guardrails, blah 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 blah, and then China shows up with a model and says, look at this. Like
that's a whole other episode. Bill, I agree with you. I think the human connection, the careers and community building, experience design, human connection, in-person stuff is going to be really important over the next several years. I read somewhere that mental health professions or careers in mental health are expected to grow 3 times as much or more than other fields in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think there's so much opportunity to design your life and design your work life. I'd love to ask this one question that I'm so dying to ask you this question. Do you, Bill, have a favorite designing your life activity?
Oh gosh, I like all of them, but I've often somebody had a thing and said, hey, would you come to Bali and run a 1-week workshop? I'm like, Bali? Sure.
Yeah.
It didn't end up happening, but what I was thinking would be so much fun, because my favorite is the Odysseys. Like most people are trying to figure out how to figure out what's next. And maybe if they're a little bit, out of the box, they've got an A and a B choice. But there's tons of data on when you only have a binary, you choose poorly and it's a bad thing. So 3 or more is always better. And the idea of doing 3 completely different versions of your life brings up so much stuff that I actually think, the classes here are 10 weeks. I could do a class called Designing Your Life, the Odyssey. And then we just do Odysseys for 10 weeks, because when you do it quickly, you get some stuff. And then when you really invest in it, a bunch of other stuff shows up, because you are more than one life. You're more, there's more in you going on than just this linear career. And, and do I do the career at this company or that company? There's so much more happening. I mean, look at you. You went from, HR, senior management to, a portfolio of a bunch of different things, right? And I think portfolio careers will be much more common and much more valued in the future, because they're also more resilient. You have multiple ways of supporting yourself. So I think it would be the Odyssey, because I think when people really invest in it, and or I sit down with them and we do it together, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea that there were that many interesting ways I might live and then design a job inside that really good life. And so that's my favorite. And and I'm working on a thing now, because we're doing a 3rd book. I'm working on a thing called Odysseys Together. And this kind of came up because when we were doing the first book tour, Dave and I were in Chicago, and this young couple came up to us. We're signing books, and they said, hey, we've already got your book, but we wanted to tell you that your book saved our marriage. They're like, what? We didn't even talk about marriage or relationships. In fact, one of the flaws in the book is it's just all about just you by yourself, and that you're never by yourself. You're always in a community. And she said, no, the thing is, we both have careers. And it was always this tension, do we move my career forward, or her career forward, or her career forward, or my career forward? And who's going to take one for the team and step back? And then when we started doing Odysseys and we were brainstorming together, we realized there were dozens of ways for us to have the life we wanted, and that none of the trade-offs that we were, fighting about were real.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's got to be the next thing we do. Is how do people, because you could design Odysseys together as partners. You can design Odysseys together as family. People are dying for community. How do you design Odysseys together to create community?
Yeah.
and having more than one way, one model for how a community might evolve, and embedding that idea of creativity and ideation inside kind of everything you do. Because once you've got odysseys, you've got lots of things to prototype. Once you've got prototypes, you're engaged in the world, right?
Yeah.
And then that stuff where you're saying, I don't know why this keeps working, but it seems to keep working.
Yeah. I mean, I think it keeps working because you're using design thinking to design.
Yeah, and you're working off of your strengths, and you're doing the best work you can do because you're matching what you know how to do well to what is available to do.
Yeah.
Again, this isn't. I don't believe in manifesting or any of that stuff. But there is some neuroscience. There was a guy who wrote a book on the neuroscience behind manifesting, which is simply you put something in your mind, you hold it in your subconscious, and now what you're looking for changes. And so when opportunities arise, you notice them, whereas before you were tunnel visioned.
Yep. James Doty.
Yeah,
Magic.
Doty, and then a guy named Richard Weissman who wrote a book on luck. It's the same thing. It's not that you're lucky; it's that you're noticing what's coming at you. If you were there when we did the wonder glasses exercise, I've got this new thing called "Put on your wonder glasses." And so I think it would be Odysseys because I think it opens up. It shows people once they actually get into it that this notion of trade-offs is I mean, it's all true. You need to make money, and you have to raise the kids, and you got to pay the mortgage. None of that's not there. That's all there. But how you approach it, how you frame it, what you think the limits are.
Yeah.
What limits are real and what limits are just made up in your head.
Right.
Are what we play with when we play with options, right? We say, well, what if we, like the wild card, what if you didn't care about money? What would you do if you didn't care about money? By the way, I do this with startup founders. Odysseys, 3 plans, like your business plan, an option B if that doesn't work. And what would you do if you didn't need to raise any money? You could do whatever you want. And the thing they would do if they didn't need to raise money is never the crappy startup they're thinking of.
Yeah. So I love Odyssey plans. This podcast, I am convinced, is a manifestation of an Odyssey plan. When I was in the coach training, my group and some of the pre-work was creating these Odyssey plans, and I was having so much fun with it. I started off with, okay, what if I just stick with my HR career? And then I was like, well, I've always, flirted with the idea of a PhD and going into teaching full time. And then I've always flirted with the idea of like coaching practice. That's something I know I want to do. And out of nowhere, Bill, I created this one plan that I was like, well, what if I was like, Anthony Bourdain just like went around the world and like tasted like food, and I just want to like talk to people about how they design their lives and and I want to share this information in some kind of a show or something. And so I'm showing this to my group, and it was so funny because I go through like all the plans, and at one point someone unmutes and goes, Sara, you lit up when you talked about that last plan where you were talking to people about how they design their lives. And I was like, oh, that's just so silly. I don't even like being like on camera. I don't like speaking. That's silly. I don't think I'd do that. No. And like 3 years later, 2 years later, whatever, here I am, right?
Well, see, that's also the genius of working in the triads and stuff that we do. It's like, almost always people say, oh, yeah, my wild card is crazy. It's not possible. And 90% of the time, the rest of the group goes, that was the one that you really lit up on. And we noticed, we noticed your body language, your voice, everything changed. So, and then the question is, it's not really that crazy. It's like you got to morph it a little bit. I'm not Anthony Bourdain. I'm not flying around the world with a CNN crew.
Right.
But I could capture these stories and tell the world about them in a way that's engaging and interesting. And it was interesting. I think I had a piece of data because I was talking again to the HR people. It's like 70% of the Gen Zs have a side hustle, which is it's interesting. It's not so much that they're looking for meaning and purpose, and some of them maybe are just running around trying to be influencers or doing something silly, but a lot of them are actually just trying to find something to do that feeds the other part of their soul that work isn't feeding. Which again is this idea of everyone's going to have a portfolio in the future. And maybe your side hustle is you've got an AI agent that you've trained to do something, and it does something for people, and you sell that. And maybe your other side hustle is, I was talking to one of my students because I'm teaching the class this quarter for graduate students, PhD students, BA students, master's students, and she's a PhD.
Yes.
And she's doing a PhD in very complex, electronic sensors and things. She's very, very smart.
Good.
She's sort of having a crisis of faith. She's not sure that science is the way to solve problems. And she loves baking, and she's done some very professional training as a pastry chef.
Yeah.
And she's also done a bunch of stuff, in like drama and performance, because that was her passion when she was younger. So you've got this scientist halfway through a PhD in really technical stuff who loves baking and loves feeding people, just the joy of bringing people together around communities and feeding. And I'm going, well, why are those? So, and you think of those three things as being, it's impossible. I have to pick one or the other, and none of them are good none of them do being a baker, I don't know if I make enough money. Being a scientist, I don't know if I really care about the research anymore. Putting communities together, yeah, that sounds fine, but that's like my mom had dinner parties. What's the big deal? And I'm going, no. Stop. Why can't you be all three of those? Why not? Why not? So I think the positive sides of things like the internet and the ability to create podcasts and get audiences, none of that existed 20 years ago. There was no YouTube. There's no Google. It's like now you can, just do it. And if you do it again, like back to the story of so you're the CEO of this podcast. If you have integrity, if you only do product you think is valuable. A long time ago when I was doing consulting, we had an opportunity to work with Lady Gaga. I never met her, but we worked through her people on a project. And she had a partner, and she didn't like the work. And they were like, but it's good enough. We can just ship it. And she's like, and I'll never forget that she said, you can't unrelease an album. I'm an artist. It has to be the best I can do. If it's not going to be the best I can do, I'm out. And I thought, so that's the integrity piece, right? So this is my product. This is my output. I'm the CEO. There's nobody telling you got to put out a substandard product or do something you don't like. And if the thing you got in the can for this week is no good, don't show it. But I'm absolutely convinced that if you do the best that you believe you can do, and it's connected to what you think people need. I mean, it can't be so esoteric that you're the only person in the world who cares.
Right.
But you are the CEO of this organization, so have the integrity, have the capacity to do the best you can. Insist on quality. Listen carefully to the feedback you get, because that's the design piece. Like the empathy is, what are my listeners getting from this? What are they learning? I'm trying to process an interesting piece of information, because as we're writing a new book, I'm trying to figure out what to make and what to do differently. And I talk to people, and sometimes I get the reaction, and it's wonderful. They say, I read your book and it changed my life. I go, fantastic. Can you tell me what exercises were the most useful and most powerful? And almost 90% of the time they say, I didn't do any of the exercises. I just read the book and it changed my life. And I'm thinking, okay, I worked really hard in the exercises, but it turns out something else happened. Like you read something and it was just a reframe and that's what stuck. And so I keep saying, tell me more until I find out, well, it was the thing about prototyping, or it was the thing about reframe, thing about having multiple ideas, not just one, have three. So there's always one thing that seems to for that person was a big enough reframe or a big enough idea that it really did change, not all of their life, but it changed the way they think about what's possible. And so I'm actually thinking, maybe I don't need to write any do any exercises in this next book. It's really hard to come up with exercises.
I love the exercises. I'm a big fan of get to the work and do the work.
Yeah. And about 20% of the people come up to me, and the book is, there's a Post-it on every page, and there's notes on every page, and they went into every single exercise, and they bought the workbook, and they really did the work, and that's great. But there's a lot of people that just sort of read it, and so I'm trying to think about, well, what does change somebody thinking enough for them to have a kind of aha moment? And, designers are really good at designing experiences and moments. And how can we, I'm thinking plus a book. The book will come out. A new book will come out probably in January next year, and about a year. And maybe even reading books anymore. I mean, you can just go get the AI summary probably before it hits the street.
Fully one of my bookshelves, but yes.
Well, what else could we do to make the book a more, engaged thing where more aha moments might happen? I'm always curious to. You read lots of books, but but you also consume a lot of content in other ways. What's the way that you would consume something like this, like a book that's trying to change the way you think or change the frameworks you think with? Would that be a video? Would that be an app, an AI thing? What would it be?
I think people are hungry for experience, right? So it's almost like what if there was a book that shared ideas to help people to plant the seed of thinking differently, and then you put them in either a virtual or an in-person experience. It's almost like an invitation. The book is your invitation to this experience you get to do, and it's a class.
Right. It's more than a book club, and we talk about it, and we comment. It's more like the book creates experiences, and then you click the QR code, and you're in a I don't know, you're in a VR world, or you're in a world with other people. Like at 2:00 on Tuesdays, everybody's going to get together, and we're going to do this thing, and it's just an ad hoc because there are people all over the world now.
Yeah.
Books in 26 languages.
Yeah. So and it could actually inspire people to start to build community. Earlier this year, I started I was reading Tribal, and I put on my Instagram, I'm reading this book. I would love to do a book club with people. And someone I used to work with at Tesla years ago reached out. I was like, I want to do a book club. And then pretty soon we had we call it the Tesla book club. But all these people were like, oh, let's do a book club, right? And so now we're on our second book. So I think people are really hungry for that connection, that connectivity, and meeting people. And so maybe your next book is like an invitation to,
the one example of that I thought was pretty cool was Sheryl Sandberg's book on, Lean In?
Yes.
And then all these lean in
movement.
Lean in circles started happening. And I don't know if that's still happening. I don't know if it's still a thing. Yeah. But that was one that I think the call to action was, hey, let's women get together. Let's figure this out. Right. And it was really clear. And I think they created the infrastructure for that to happen. And I haven't heard about it in a few years, but I imagine it's still going.
Yeah, I believe so. I think it was a really big thing back in the 2013, 14, 15, that time frame. But I mean, I think there's so much potential out there for, using a book like this, like Designing Your Life, to bring people together and ideate and imagine and think about how to live your life differently. And when we talk about designing your life and living it differently, it's not just the big changes that you make. It's like the tiny changes. Like, how can I design my day a little differently? How do I design?
Always the tiny changes, right?
One of my favorite things that I've learned through your work is that energy management tool. Oh my gosh, Bill, it changed my life. It's changed the lives of people that I've worked with. It's changed the lives of my clients, where it's just becoming aware of what are the things you're doing that are just draining you. And then what are the things you're doing that are, making you feel really good. And how do you structure your day so you're feeling good most of your day?
Yeah, it came out of the thing. Everybody's trying to do time management. So it's not time. Time is not what you're managing. You're managing what you pay attention to, what you put your energy against. The reframe is like time. I can time manage and time box and do all this stuff. That's good, but it isn't going to change how I feel. And so we're always back. I mean, designers care about, empathy is about feelings and understanding how people feel and understanding how what they do makes them feel. Mm-hmm. How can they reframe that so that they, are doing the things that they, that you're actually paying attention to and putting your energy behind the things that matter, right? Which can be small things, very small things.
Oh, Bill, I feel like I could talk to you forever. This is so fun. I know you have a million other things to do. So thank you so much for your time and for being here and downloading Chrome and and the best to you for this next book. I'm excited to see what you all come up with.
Yeah, and come to the coaches workshops because we'll be previewing some of that stuff and prototyping it with you guys to see. It's interesting. Every time we invent an exercise, we think it's going to work really well, and the first time we run it, of course, it's under scaffolded, and people get confused and they don't know what they're doing. So it always takes 2 or 3 runs, even for us, and we're pretty experienced at it. Me and Dave. to figure out how do you, if you're trying to get someone to have this moment where they realize, oh, I can think about this differently, and that would have this value to me.
Yeah.
Designing those moments is a tricky bit, but that's what we hope to do. And that's again, every time I do a talk or a podcast like this, I'm absolutely astonished that this is going so well. I'm humbled that people send me emails, and it's so wonderful, to have any kind of impact on anybody. I love it when I'm in the classroom and I see students lighting up. But this larger virtual community and the book community, we're so grateful for. So thank you for asking me to come on the show.
Thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your day.